All right, guys, so welcome back to the second episode of the Pale Horse Podcast. I'm sitting here with one of my good friends, Justin Stevens, and we've got a lot of good things planned for you on this podcast, talking about the holidays and 2023 and recapping some things we've talked about, and we'll dive right into it. All right, Justin, so introduce yourself to the audience. Most everybody knows me. I'm Ryan, Director of Training at Apex Defense Group, and let Justin tell a little bit more about himself.
All right. Justin Stevens, spent a little time in the military. Recently got back from a trip overseas as well. So I have a little experience with handguns and rifles and things of that nature, tactical. Good deployment. We spent about a year there, about 12 months with training up and everything. We basically went over there to help the local soldiers there train up and learn more about weapon familiarization and things like that. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful to see the people, learn their culture a little bit more, and see what threats they face there. So
yeah, that's been my big takeaway overseas, just getting to know the culture and just the different types of people you meet, and then the lives that you get to actually be a part of that you wouldn't get to be a part of over here, and the guys that you're with, and the camaraderie. And I was talking earlier about just missing that team environment, and for sure that's something I take away. So biggest takeaway or lesson learned from Africa and the whole training regimen and everything, how do you think it's going?
Biggest takeaway, be willing to stand for and fight for what you believe and what's yours. Just being able to travel there and to see the willingness for people who might not have all the resources that we feel we would need, they were still willing to stand and fight and live and die for what their mission was,
Yeah.
And I thought that was really powerful. I mean, you saw guys over there training in, dress shoes, no shoes in some cases, like
right.
doing things I'm like, I wouldn't do, with boots sometimes. So it was really impressive.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for sure. When I was over there, we had guys that were, some of them unarmed, who were still showing up, to do raids it's just crazy, the willingness to fight and try to make their country a better place, for sure. Okay, so biggest training takeaway or preparation takeaway from your deployment? Oh,
wow. Really just being able to understand your environment.
Yeah.
Right, and utilize that environment because you never know the terrain or environment you'll be in any given battle. So being able to assess it and utilize it to your advantage. Maybe you have hills, maybe you don't. Maybe you have valleys, maybe you have water, maybe you have an urban environment, and being able to look around and say, "This is what I can use to give me an advantage."
So talking to a student and mentioning you coming back, and the student's question that I was asked was, why are we still in Africa? What do we have any business doing there?
Yeah.
Your response.
Yeah. Africa is a land grab. Africa is a land grab. So you got a lot of different nations there kind of shoving around policies and things, trying to take control of, whether it's canals or the waterways or just land itself. So that's what Africa's about right now.
Yeah. So much of the world right now, it's these small third world countries who are essentially just selling off critical resources, critical infrastructure, the highest bidder, just to keep the nation afloat. Or it's, we'll come in here and build bridges and roads and build up your infrastructure, and in return, then we own a piece of this, or we have a say, or we get to put certain political powers in place. And China's been doing that for a long time. The last 10 years has been going in. When I was in Southeast Asia, we were training some in the military over there, and there was this terrible city, and there was a road getting put in, 8-lane wide highway on each side. They were riding around in tuk-tuks, and there's a 8-lane wide highway stretching all through the country that China was coming and putting in, paving these roads and bridges and making initiatives, and then putting delegates in power. all it is just securing their foothold in that nation. Did you see China in Africa?
Yeah, I didn't get to see like visually, but we know that they're there. They're pretty close in proximity to where a lot of the other forces are. And the thing about China being there, a lot of their private companies are their government, so it's,
for sure.
Yeah. So it's interesting when they say, China's here, they have specialized military guys who are government. Their agenda is the same as the government, so.
Yeah, or I mean, all these corporations who are getting put in, whose agenda is the government, or China will have buy into a majority stakeholder of a business.
Yeah,
and then next thing you know, that business is reporting everything, all details back to the Chinese government, and the Chinese government's having a say in where that business venture goes. And we see that with lithium mines, we see that with big tech, we see that with apps like TikTok and certain apps where these Chinese businesses will buy into this or buy a majority shareholder with such like a lithium mine.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, every production, every facet of that business now reports back to the Chinese government, produces documents and gives all their documents over to the Chinese military intelligence services, whether they use that to spy or keep inventory or just slow production, which we've seen in the supply chain. We've seen, these Chinese corporations and businesses buy into these medical supply companies, and then you see the Chinese government go, I think we're going to slow production down on that. And then they're shipped Pakistan, Afghanistan, Africa, Southeast Asia. They're putting these spheres of influence in so they can start to control even more supply chain or, have bridges that are capable of moving Chinese troops or whatever the case may be. So it is interesting. I think that China's going to be a big player for 2023. It's what I want to spend a lot of this podcast talking about. It's just 2023 and kind of going into 2023 and what we see. But I think that China's going to be a big player for a lot of reasons. I think you're going to start to see China making moves in 2023 on an international scale. They're in tight with the Biden administration right now, and I saw some new figures coming about how much money we're still supplying to China and the Biden administration supplying to China.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk about 2023 and the vision and stuff. So my whole thing with the podcast is, preparing you to meet your enemy in eternity. So I know you're, military and military experience and, religious and spiritual rather. Yeah. And so the things I like to focus on in this podcast is the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. So the physical training side, the mental training side, going through life, and then handling these spiritual topics as well. Just it's all about growth. I think it's the three ways that we as men or as war fighters or whatever term you want to give operators, civilians, who still should be in a operating capacity as far as living good lives and being good influences and mentors. And Rod and I were talking about that last week. As far as that goes, just trying to live out the way that we should. And I think that the physical, the mental, and the spiritual is going to be the three big ones. So that's kind of what I want to dive into today and go over. So your biggest physical preparation, mental preparation, and spiritual preparation, either lesson learned or prep prior to deployment or post-deployment?
Overall, the way I train for physical is changed. Before it was, I just want to put on a lot of muscle and look a certain way, but then you realize the demand of being in combat or training up for combat and just being well-rounded in your training. And it comes down that spreads into everything, right?
Absolutely.
Being well-rounded in all of your training. You just can't be a shooter, but you also have to train medicine or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Tactics.
Tactics, exactly. So understanding history even. So you have to, really educate yourself in a well-rounded way. So physically, it's the same thing. You want to be able to sprint. You want to be able to, good core and things like that. So the way I train has definitely transformed a lot for that. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I know he's always in the gym posting pictures, he's just shredded and it makes me jealous. And, I've got old and fat.
I'm getting old and fat too.
Yeah, you're still fine. So what is that new routine looking like?
It's more resistance bands. Like if you get into specifics like resistance and kettlebells, movement, just the different planes of movement is really a part of my workouts now. Because like I said, I'm getting older now, so there's certain movements that hurt.
It's not the years, it's the miles.
It's the miles, definitely the miles. But it's certain movements that hurt more than they, are more painful. So I try to exercise or stretch more, and just keep my agility. That's something that can fade if you don't use it, you lose it, they say. So agility and things like that.
Yeah. So Pat Mack says motion is lotion.
Motion is lotion. That's right. I like that. Yeah.
So on a personal training side, what physical train up advice would you start giving to the podcast listeners?
The number one thing is to create the lifestyle around it, right? Because a lot of times when you go into working out, things like that, you think like, I want to get the craziest results the fastest. Yeah. And you sustain some type of injury would put you out of the game for, whatever amount of time. So really looking at it like, okay, this is my long-term goal, and then working your way into that with a plan and a pace. I think that would be probably the most useful for someone going into trying to get into shape or taking their results to the next level. It would be coming in and taking one day at a time and not breaking yourself to create some result you see. So, small disciplines really create results. And that's one of the things I really focus on.
Interesting you say that. Something I've been focused on a lot is discipline, just across all facets of life. And I think that's the one thing that most of us are missing out on. I mean, I like to eat my brownies and cheesecake late at night, so I said packed on, right? Packed on weight, and and it used to be I would work out with guys or work with guys who went to the gym for the mere sake of how they looked, and it never sustained. Yeah. Or it was a certain type of muscle that was developed. They might be physically strong and look great, however, endurance would suffer. Yep. Or it was sustainability behind the rifle. Even now, I train some guys who are just jacked, and we'll teach long range shooting. They're sitting behind a rifle for a minute, and their traps and neck, and they're starting to get kinked up and sore tight, and things start tightening up. And I think they didn't realize that the more muscle they packed on, the faster that some of them got just smoked.
They need oxygen,
Yeah, need oxygen. And so, we'll do hand to hand, and we would sit there and roll together. And you got these little dudes, who are just wearing out these big dudes in 30 seconds and then just choking them out. Yep. I mean, just repeatedly, and they couldn't sustain that fight. So I think that physically speaking, discipline's definitely, and building up that endurance and not trying to put on muscle. I don't think the people that put on muscle for looks, I don't think it ever sustained, or it became such a idol that was their goal in life. It just became so we laugh, about dudes in CrossFit. It's like they have to tell you that they're in CrossFit within the first 30 seconds of talking to you, in class against students. Like, hey man, introduce yourself. Well, I'm Kyle, I do CrossFit. It's like, okay, so I asked if you could shoot a pistol, but thanks for telling me that. But I think it just becomes such a identity, and I think that's the word I want to use. And I think that's the one thing that we're suffering from in society right now, is a lack of true male identity, or us getting identity in certain lifestyle choices or lifestyle behaviors that then ends up leaving us void. Yeah. So thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Identity is huge. And like you said, even a lot of people do. They do go into the gyms with this vision of, big muscles because it's going to give me a certain image, which is going to allow me, access in certain communities or on IG or social media, things like that. Yeah. So it does have a lot to do with identity. And I think your journey develops, right? Like once you start to become more comfortable in your own identity, I don't think you feel like, I think you develop beyond I need muscles to affirm myself or to gain access certain places. Yeah. So getting beyond that, allowing yourself to grow beyond that, and to really, who am I? What am I up to? And allowing that to dictate what workout styles you do. Like I said, because I need to move fast. I work with a lot of guys who are we pack light when we move because we speed kills. And so I focus more on being able to move fast with my gear. The heavier I am with muscle, I have to carry that. So I think identity definitely plays a part in how you work out. Like you said, you do have these guys, and there's nothing wrong if you want to be muscle bound, right? But there are a lot of guys who have a bunch of muscle who can't move or can't sustain that movement.
Exactly.
And that's counterproductive to what your job is, what your profession is. So it's kind of balancing that.
Yeah. Well, I laugh because some guys I used to work with, and they would be so big that they couldn't actually perform like they needed to. As far as hand to hand, if I wrapped them up on the ground, they were just so big, or like trying to reach back and couldn't, or like their draw stroke on a pistol. There are shooters who were great, and they kept packing on so much muscle that it ended up slowing down their draw time. Yeah. And I think there needs to be a balance. If you look at a lot of the operators that we train and teach, none of them are jacked. Like they're just not. They're just solid guys who train for endurance or they're performance based. Yeah. And I think that's what we need to start shifting towards. My version of working out is I lift a fork to my mouth right now. So, it's just I need to be a little more disciplined about that too. As far as performance goes. But it's true, I'm all about, like you said, it's speed. Whether it's shooting or moving, I want to be the fastest one. I want to be there. I want to get there first and not be smoked or when I get there. Yeah. So sprints and endurance and these guys that spend tons of money on gear. Yeah. And they run 100 yards in class and can't hit a target at 50 yards because they're breathing so heavy or can't get behind the rifle or can't get settled and it
all plays a part in
it definitely all plays a part in preparedness.
Yeah, absolutely. And then again, the working out, what you eat, how it fuels you, and you learn those things along the way. You know when you need a little sugar. You know when your brain starts getting foggy and stuff like that. You learn because you deal with your body as like this. It's a part of my kit. Right. You use your body. My body is a part of my kit, and so when you look at it like that, you really start to assess. What you need for the loadout. Yeah. I
always carried candy bars in my kit because after that you go out and perform that objective or you have such an adrenaline rise and then that glucose fall after that adrenaline crash and people talk about adrenaline crash. It's usually your sugar levels just crash. So if you don't have like a tactical Snickers in your plate carrier, come on now, we gotta have some type of like licky or sticky,
Yep, absolutely. It'll bring you back.
Yeah, I carried Lifesavers. My last, I carried Lifesavers. And, just something sweet, minty, brought me back to, home. Yeah, absolutely.
Rice Krispie treat or something.
Ooh, that'd be good. All right, so speaking on nutrition, you're big into nutrition and nutritional plans. And so talk to us about that. How should we be eating 2023?
2023. Again, circling it around your lifestyle, right? So think lifestyle. Don't think, just crazy results so I can, show off for the summer, right? So
it's my problem.
Right. It's because it's enticing, but sometimes it's not feasible and it can be overwhelming when we look at it like that. So obviously lean proteins, taking in your water and hydrating, things like that, but also allowing yourself to enjoy your meals. So that it is sustainable. But the basic principles, lean protein, getting your right carbs, drinking your water, exercising. But overall, you want to make sure it's sustainable. So there's nothing wrong with enjoying meals. There's nothing wrong with enjoying certain days and things like that, as long as you're moving forward in your overall plan. And you can kind of just reassess yourself, weekly, or periodically, so you can see if it's working for you.
Yeah. Interesting. So my goal for 2023, and the word that I'm going to use for 23 is going to be intentional. I want to be intentional in everything that I'm doing. And that's going to be my challenge to the students, challenge to the guys that come train, challenge to our team is going to be intentional. Yeah. Whether that's in the physical with your training regimens, whether that's with your dry fire routines, whether it's with your shooting, your performance, the classes that you're taking. And then I also want to be intentional in the mental game, in life. I have wasted so many years either dating the wrong people or dating the right people and then not actually making good decisions or, blowing money financially. Sean was on last week and such a wealth of knowledge on the financial. We'll have him back for financial investments and things. And, or just paying off debt or making purchases that are everything. I want to be intentional and not just thinking about, well, how's it going to, impact me today, but what are we going to be impacting for? How is this going to fit into a broad plan? whether that's, the classes that we're teaching, just being intentional with growing people in those certain areas, and also spiritually. Like, it's one of my lessons I've learned the last couple months is Jesus was so intentional with us and with everything he did and with his time, and nothing was a wasted moment. And God is very intentional with us, very intentional with us. And so if we're to model our lives, I need to just do such a better job with being intentional, whether it was with friendships or relationships, or future girlfriend, or, financial decisions, and then training. My own dry fire routines, my own actions, my own lifestyle choices, my nutrition, my workout. It all just needs to be so much more intentional. And I've done that for students. Like, here's your 1 year, training plan. Mm-hmm. But then we fail to do that to ourselves, and that's something that we really, really need to work on, is that intentionality. And I think it's to be well-rounded. I think people don't know where the term operator, truly came from back, and it's gotten lost through history. But that term is thrown around so often now. Of he's an operator, or that guy's an operator. I see it on IG all the time, right? Train like an operator, and all these training regimens, operator AK class, and things that just come through. And the term operator originally was established by a special operations soldier who had graduated 5 schools. And most people don't know that. That's where the term originally came from. What they were trying to do was build, and I quote, operators. It was guys who are well-rounded. So they had maybe graduated from, air assault and CQB and medicine, or they had whatever, the sapper and SEER, whatever the course was, a pipeline. They wanted them to be just overall well-rounded, because it all ties together. When I teach long-range math and I teach a basic defensive carbine course, we tie some of the long-range math in the carbine course to get those hits. We shoot half-size silhouettes at 300 yards, from various positions, from standing, kneeling, prone, barricade. And so it all ties, or medicine, we'll work tactical medicine in the advanced handgun. We have in 2023 some classes on the schedule for like shooter down rifle, shooter down pistol, working the medicine in. And then we tie that in TAC Med 2. We have pistol, rifle, force on force, and medicine all mixed together. And those are the courses that I love to teach, just overall love to teach. B, I think that those are the courses that students have the most growth from, because they're getting trained, everything's tying together. So we have students that just take a medical class or just a handgun class, or they just do shooting and maybe never do force on force. And I've got some of the greatest 3-gun shooters in the state that I teach, and they come to a force on force class and are just obliterated all day long. And then they grow in that field. And then, well, what happens if you're injured? So we got to grow the medicine. And then, well, what happens if that takes place inside your home? Well, they have to grow in CQB. And then we teach blades. And so, you got these great shooters who then don't carry a blade or don't know anything about blades. And I'm going, okay, but what if you want to fight me in a car? And you have to fight Greg and I, in a car in CQB, or in a bathroom in Blade 2. And on the ground, over your weapon. I don't want to try to produce a pistol on the ground, or I don't want to try to produce a pistol fighting with you in a car. And so that's when a blade comes in. And so I think for me, I'm always a student. I'm always learning. I always have something to grow in and refine my skill and play out these scenarios. And that's, all about being an operator. It's that well-rounded in all facets. Did you see a lot of that going on overseas? Do you think that we need to spend more training time in that? How did you see that affect some guys and not others? So your thoughts, opinions.
Just to add on to what you said, like you said, the more well-rounded you are, the more well-rounded you are.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that, right? The more the context becomes clear, it starts to make more sense. The bigger picture starts to make more sense.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, whether it's physical, spiritual, tactical, all these things, the more well-rounded you are, the context starts to make more sense. And so overseas, definitely the groups we were working with over there, they were very well-rounded. They were educated in medicine, definitely hands-on, tactical, intel, computers, all types of things that made the big picture clear and allowed them to communicate the relevant picture to the person they were speaking with. You know, because this person sees the big picture. You know, they see the different resources that we can utilize to get the job done. You know, but if you just specialize in one area, then what's the quote? To a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yeah, right.
You know? And so that's kind of the way you look at everything. You filter everything through your educational awareness or exposure. Yeah. So yeah, the more well-rounded you are, I think you can better utilize resources. So definitely over there, there's a lot of guys who we taught training classes every day. Almost every day, at least 2 or 3 times a week. There would be someone leading a course that would just give you a little bit of familiarization with something new. And that was really, it just helps you put the bigger picture together. So so that's how it is in life, man. So
okay. So for 2023, your recommendation is going to be physically be more well-rounded, take a bunch of courses, start studying different areas. My area I know is going to be different types of just food preservation without refrigeration. Whether that's instead of milk, using sourdough starter, or maybe stock on like canned milk and trying recipes with canned milk. And that's just one area. With shooting, I've got it, written down, but it's just one area. So then, all right, let's go mental.
Ooh. Read books, have conversations, educate yourself. And the thing about trying anything new is like there's a part of you that becomes fearful, right? Like there's a part that says, hey, don't do that.
Like doing a podcast.
Just like that. It's crazy. Here we are, right? But just like doing a podcast, there's a part of you that says, hey, you never done that before, leave that to someone else. But if you're aware of that and you can push beyond that, then you can better yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's easy, like for a fitness guy, I go in the gym and I'm comfortable with certain exercises and things like that. Yeah. So even in a gym, and I've been working out for, like a little over 10 years, I still have to push myself consciously, intentionally, like you said, push myself to learn something new so I can overall make myself better performer. So
yeah, it's something I see all the time in the shooting industry, and I'm guilty of it too. It's students only want to train in what they're good at. They won't take a shooting from retention course, or like we have a 4-hour workshop coming up, shooting from retention, because they've never done it. It's like, no, that needs to be what you guys are like driving towards, is do things that you've never done. Some of the self-defense, it's the same way, or the guys don't want to shoot in front of other guys, because they're afraid they might mess up or might.
It's gonna make you look bad.
Yeah, it's gonna make you look bad. We've all been there. Yeah. But then I myself find myself doing that as an instructor. Certain drills I'll be more prone to demo in class because I know I'm good at them.
Right. Yeah.
And from us, it's my goal is or theory is no instructor should be beat by a student. And so in almost 10 years of teaching, I've never been beaten by a student. And that's the goal, right? It's not that if you do beat an instructor, that does not mean that you can learn nothing. Right, it's not. I've taken so many training classes where the instructors beat me or I've beaten the instructor, and I have come away with the same amount of knowledge in either one of them, as long as the instructor is, speaking truth. And so it doesn't mean anything. So don't look into that. But it's a pride thing, but also just it's the way I was brought up in the training industry. My old boss, that was something that he reiterated to us. You do not get beat by a student. If you demo a drill, you better still have the fastest time in class. And he held us to that standard. That I cut my teeth on. And of course, it made us. I know why he did it. It wasn't that we got fired if a student beat us. He drove us to train ourselves on our own time and on company time. He drove us to be such high-level performers. We were teaching special operations units and SWAT, and we were expected to just smoke those guys. And it wasn't a pride thing for him. There was such a wealth of knowledge on that teaching staff. It was he wanted us to grow ourselves and better ourselves to the point that we hit those levels and never stop growing. Because just then he'd start to, all right, well, if you want to start running this class, you need to be top performing instructor. And then he wouldn't pit us against each other. It was, hey, you are better at this drill, you're better at this. Hey, grow each other. And that's why I miss that team environment, that camaraderie, that mentorship, that ironing, sharpening iron. And so we hit that. And so I'll be more prone, like my ready ups. I know my ready ups with the carbine are just, solid, or rifle to pistol transitions, or marksmanship, or whatever the case may be. And then there's other drills that, maybe I haven't ran in a year or two, that we all of a sudden want to throw into a course. It's like, man, I haven't ran that drill in a couple years, I might not demo that drill in class. I might let one of the other instructors demo that drill in class. Like, I'll let him do that, and I'll just go do that on my own time, But it is such a pride thing, I think, is we don't do things that we're not comfortable at. And that should be, that should be the time where we step up and like, no, I'm going to run this drill. Yeah. And, it's going to identify some weaknesses, and I need to take those weaknesses over.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so spiritual then. Mm-hmm. What do you think for 2023 spiritual prep?
Same word it starts with, be discipline, lifestyle.
Okay.
But the reason I say that is because the little consistencies add up.
Yeah.
The little consistencies add up. So whether it's, a chapter a day, or memorizing a verse, or a little time in prayer, or, whatever it is that you want to create that discipline, the little consistencies add up. Because again, it's when you look at this big picture, I got to become spiritual.
Right.
Christ-like.
Wait, what does it even mean?
What does that even mean?
Like, what is spiritual warfare? Can you define that for me? Yeah.
I have no idea. It's so overwhelming to look at in a big scheme of things. But as you just line a little bit of consistency up, you just chain those days together of consistency. And before you know it, you're changing or you're transforming. Physical is the same way, like I said. So physical fitness is one of the areas where I was able to apply these principles that I found out that they were true. Okay. Because I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this little thing over and over again. And in doing a little thing over and over again, I saw transformation. I was like, okay, well, maybe I can do that in this area and in this area. So physical fitness for me was definitely connected to my spiritual fitness, So
I've heard a lot of guys say that. They connect the two. I've never tried connecting the two. But you're trying to get into both?
Yeah.
You're trying to connect those? To me, it's the discipline and spirituality of I'll go out and just spend time in nature doing plant ID or something. Yep. It's just going over just movement or camo, and then that's my time where I can spend more spiritual time and things like that, tactics and things. So I want to start applying those to physical fitness and watch that carry over.
Right. Well, I still need to learn about plant ID.
That's right.
So, it's
iron sharpening iron.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
I think that you're right. And discipline and intentionality, I think, are going to be so important. So 2023, I've been saying it over and over. I think 2023 is going to be a rough year. I just do. And it's not just me that thinks that. A lot of the guys in the industry think that. A lot of guys that I worked with in the government think that. Pastors, I mean, just it's all facets of life. I think that 2023 is going to be a rough year. And I think that it's going to be a lot of fights, physical, mental, spiritual. I think spiritual warfare is going to be pretty heavy. I think that just warfare on the country and the mental battles that we have and the physical realm, whether it's China or, Russia, Ukraine, or political unrest, whatever we're going towards. I do think it's going to, I think 2023 is going to be a rough year. And I think the way that we're going to get to push through that is better training and preparation in mental, physical, and spiritual. So I think intentionality is going to be important, and discipline is going to be important. And those two factors, it's just something that I've been working on. And like you said, it's those little battles, dip your feet into, we just taught a shooting on the move class this past week or two. And so, hey, some guys, shooting on the move is hard. Like, it just is hard. It's learning the footwork and learning the steps, and just like CQB, like you're essentially learning how to dance and shoot at the same time, and how to limit exposure and increase movement. And when do you shoot? And then it's trying to balance the skill and the tactic. And, so a skill is, learning that skill. And then a tactic is, well, then how do I apply that skill? So you learn how to shoot on the move, but then when do we shoot on the move? And it's hard. And we had those guys who jumped in to that class and really put themselves out there to go, like this is a hard skill to learn and tactic to learn, and then taking it over into dry firing it, making that a discipline. And no matter what it's going to be, just trying to be more intentional with that training and intentional with that discipline. I know I need to gain some time with physical fitness. I've let that go this year, and I need to get back in the swing of things.
Myself with dry fire, man. Like, I've seen the transformation with people who consistently dry fire. Yep. So that's been the principle. I'm like, no, it works. It's the same principle at play.
I think that, we've got to be better about that in 2023. I've got students who don't dry fire. And, my ready up is 0.37 seconds on average, 0.4 seconds. My draw times consistently from the belt outside the waistband, 0.8, 0.85, somewhere in there. And that's from dry fire. It's not because I'm just amazing. It's because you put in work. That's all it comes down to, is put in work.
Absolutely.
And dry fire. I don't have enough money to shoot every week 1,000 rounds, to keep. So just dry fire, and it's not that big of a deal as long as you're doing it the right way. I think that's what discipline and being intentional is. It's doing it the right way. Like you said, working out. If your motives aren't quite clear, or your technique's not clear, or I have some students who dry fire every week and they come to class and realize that they have been drawing wrong the last 20 years of their life, and then that dry fire has definitely not helped you. It has hurt you. We saw that last week and week after with just, students who come out of the holster and like just straight up bowling, and then they're wondering why they can't get their red dot ever to be, picked up. And so doing it the right way is important. And so I say 2023 is going to be rough, and I want your thoughts on this, since we come from just different groups. I also think 2023 is going to be a year of extreme revival and movement. And I mean that spiritually, I mean that mentally, and I mean that physically. I see guys who coming in, my law enforcement, my military, my civilians I teach, who have not been consistent in their training. Now all of a sudden starting to become consistent. We've had so many guys like myself. I got saved in July, into July. I've had so many guys recently that are students, that are best friends, that are old coworkers, people that I teach, who have total mental transformations, life transformations, spiritual transformations, who are, just coming back into the fold and into the family. I made a journal entry and I said, right now there's such a gathering of people, both physically, spiritually, and emotionally. It's like Israel in the times of Joseph. There's a great awakening where people are coming back into the fold, coming back into truth. The time is coming where the gathering of wheat is happening and people are coming back into the fold. And we've seen that a lot with just people getting saved and having complete spiritual encounters and spiritual changes and lifestyle changes, just like I did, 5-6 months ago. So have you seen that in your areas, your background? Have you seen end of the last 6 months preparing up for 2023? Have you seen that kind of start to revival?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think that was the question I was going to ask, just speaking about like the person who's been dry firing the wrong way for 20 years. Like,
sure. I was living my life wrong for 28, so go ahead.
Right, exactly. I got you. Right. Uh-huh. It's applicable in those ways. Like, how does a person who's conditioned themselves or trained, if you would, in a way that doesn't help them, they've discovered that it's not working. What I've been doing for the last 20 years isn't working. Yeah. Like, how does that person, retrain or recover from that? I know for myself, so in the fitness world, right? So I'm working out. My technique isn't healthy, beneficial, but my weight's going up, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
here I am with this heavy weight, but my technique isn't good. It's counterproductive, actually. It's going to cause an injury at some point.
Sure.
So what I was able to do, I had to like humble myself first of all, because
Bingo,
I'm the
yeah.
guy in there with all the weight on.
Right.
And now I'm like, you know what? Maybe I need to take some of this weight off and just focus on technique.
Yeah.
And that's what I was able to do in my own personal gym time. Like I took the weight off, it got lighter, and so I could focus on getting good technique. And then the weight steadily came back up, but my technique was better. My technique was better. So I think a lot of people are kind of asking that question, like, okay, I know my technique isn't beneficial. It's not. It's being indicated to me that there's something wrong with my technique. Because
Absolutely.
it's not producing the results I want, and I'm looking for someone or something that can help me with that technique. And that's what I'm seeing right now at the end of 2022. And, you know, at the end of every year, you know, January's coming up and everybody's kind of like, hey, I'm going to transform some things. And it doesn't happen that way, and it doesn't continue, I think, because a lot of people get frustrated in their technique.
Absolutely.
Or the results because of a lack of technique sometimes. So I think in 2023, I think I'll make myself more available. And I think God is like really dealing with people to, like I said, the small disciplines, the go back and work on the technique, the small things. I think the scriptures say something about that. Like it's the little foxes that eat up the vine and stuff, right? It's the little things. Go work on the little things.
Yeah.
Don't focus on this overwhelming big thing. And it's in the process that you'll see the transformation. Yeah. And so that's what I'm seeing happening right now. I'm excited. Like there's a lot of work to be done, right? So
there definitely, yes. And we've seen that too. It's guys who coming back in the fold are having these just, you know, awesome spiritual transformations, like myself, life transformations. And it was, I made a journal entry. It's going to sound horrible. I'll cross the lines, but it was like, all right, so I've had a bad day. Like the relationship, you know, the ex doesn't contact me. Like I want her to come back and she's not coming back. And so I watched Pornhub 3 times today and, you know, I still feel empty and lonely and I just don't know what to do. And, you know, it's everything. I've also, I think in my journal entries, like I've called 5 friends and talked to them and asked for prayer and, you know, no matter what. And I think that it's about truth. Yeah. And then I've also heard these new people just completely coming to Christ. And I've also heard some of this year, the older, the wiser guys who are actually falling out. Yeah. And it's, well, I just don't feel the presence anymore. Or they fall out of training. Yeah. Well, I just don't feel like I'm accomplished. Or I don't feel like, I feel like I've got it. Yeah. You know, so I'm good. And or I feel like I just don't know what other class to take, and so I'll just hold off. Or I feel like I'm too busy. And it's all of these like feelings. And Britt, our wonderful podcast director sitting over here, we talk about that all the time, about feelings over facts. And had a good friend of mine message me this past week, and it was, you know, I just don't really feel like, you know, I still like God loves me. And I'm going, okay, but let's go back to truth here. Yeah. So are we going to go based on how you feel, or are we going to go based on scripture and the fact that it does? Yeah. I mean, which one are we going to do here?
Yeah, you're interesting. Right?
Yeah, like, I mean, are we going to like live our life based on feelings, which I did for 28 years. Yeah. Like it was what felt better. What was, you know, was it, I made every decision based on how it was going to make me feel, which is, you know, why single and don't, you know, not date. It was because it never did work out. It was like, well, okay, so what if I, you know, did this to this ex? Like, how did it make me feel? And dry fire. I have students go, I don't dry fire because I get bored. Okay. Well, are we going to go based on the fact that you feel like it's boring? I was like, so that just means you're not dry firing the right way. Right. Like it's all it tells me, you know? So when I dry fire, I'm over there doing one-handed manipulations and draws, and I'm clearing double feeds one-handed, and I'm doing all this stuff, you know, playing offhand and trying to just build neural pathways. You know, right. Dry fire to me is never boring. Yeah. Because I'm always just working something crazy or different. And yeah, like I'm getting draw reps in. So you have guys that sit there and dry fire, like, and so I didn't relate, you know, I'm sort of like picking on them going, how do you do? But at the same time, I'm living other areas of my life, completely based on feelings, and not facts. And, they're going, well, I don't feel like I'm dry firing. I feel like it's getting faster. Or they came and, took handgun 1 a second time. They're like, I just, don't feel like I performed any better in handgun 1. It's like, okay, what's your time say you do? Yeah. So, are we going to go based on how you feel? Or are we going to go based on the time you cut half a second off of your draw time? So you went from a 175 to 125 and your accuracy got better. So you got faster and more accurate. Like all of your times got better, all of your accuracy got better, your weapons handling got better, your fluidity got better. Are we going to go based on feelings or are we going to go based on facts? Mm-hmm. Which one are we going to do? Yeah. And it was, and then since my, salvation transformation in the last 6 months, it's been such a eye-opener for me going, okay, so I had terrible trust issues like with my last ex because of things that other exes did or just my personality. And it was, I went through this. So, it was, okay, well, was that based on a feeling or was that based on a fact? And that's why I had to look at myself. And God's been dealing with me a lot recently on like, what fruit is that producing? What fruit is whatever behavior, whatever action is that producing? And we can take that into the physical. We can take that into the mental. We can take that into the spiritual. And that's been something I've been using to evaluate my decisions recently, whether it's dry fire, whether it's fitness, whether it's live fire reps. I've completely changed my whole live fire training, personally, not in class, but personally. I have gone back to 1-inch dots, 100 yards, carbine. Sitting there just trying to take normal ARs, do 5 push-ups, go prone, and sit there and see how tight of a 5-shot group and I can get 100 yards. Or pistols, 1-inch dots, 7 yards. Out of the holster, see how fast and accurately I can hit that dot. And then it's, all right, 5 shots, 1 hole. I have gone back to just pure, accuracy standard. And I've seen that just, again, the fruit it's producing. Now I'm doing just over 1 second draws at 50 yards of the pistol, getting my hits. Because that 1.25 second draw to shoot that 1-inch dot at 7 yards has just really dialed in those fundamentals. Yeah, fundamentals, and I think in like my spiritual, it's the same thing, whether it's, breaking addictions or, breaking pornography addiction or breaking any type of old trust habits or control issues or trust issues. It's looking at that going, okay, so what is the actual fact? Like, what is the truth? Is this getting better? I don't feel like my run has gotten better, but if you look at the time sprints, they've increased. My time is getting better. And then it's, okay, so then what fruit is this producing? So I could choose to turn on and watch something, or I could choose to, text, some, person I don't need to be texting or what, some person from my past or go back to poor choices. And the old me definitely would have. I definitely would have just given in and be like, well, it's going to make me feel good. Like, she's going to text me back, or that temptation's going to text me back and be like, oh yeah, like how you doing? It's going to be something I would have went with what would make me feel better in the moment. I think the biggest transformation for me and the biggest thing I want to spend all of 2023 on in every facet, the training, the physical, the mental, is what fruit is this going to bear next week? What fruit is this going to bear next month? Yeah. If I give in and, turn on that video, or if I give in and do something, and it could be friendships. Like I was not intentional months ago with certain friendships, and I just let them just essentially die off. Guys I've been friends with for a long time, and just, over just getting busy or just focusing on something else, and let those friendships go. And so just being intentional with those friendships and come back and going, okay, like, I let I didn't text him back for, a month or whatever, or 2 weeks and when I did, it would be short. Like, what intentionality do I need? What discipline do I need? I get bombarded with emails and questions about gear and training, and I love that. Like, guys, don't stop that. But I would then go, well, I'm just kind of burnt out of looking at my cell phone, so I'm not going to text back to people and have those relationships I need to have. And then, what fruit is that produced, and those guys that since my transformation, I've tried to really go back to do that, because those are the guys, Rodney, Sean, Tim, guys, Scott, guys who, I love dearly. I would consider some of my best friends. It's reaching out and be like, hey, like, I'm just struggling with this. Like, dude, like, give me some advice, or just talk. Sometimes you just need somebody to talk with you about it. Or just be there. Like, let's just go eat. I just got a lot on my mind. Hey, let's just go grab food, and just sharing a meal with somebody does amazing things for me. It just gets me out of the house and gets me shifting gears, and we get to laugh and gut up. And, so being intentional and looking at, like, what's good, binge watching something on Netflix, what fruit is that going to produce a week from now? Mm-hmm. It might make me happy to lay in bed, eat cookies, drink milk, and watch something on Netflix, because that makes me happy from time. Like, it's a feeling thing. Yeah. Or I could reply to Scott, let's just say, and me and him could go sit down and eat, or he could come over and hang out, and we could have good quality conversation and clean a gun, like, which I desperately need to do. It's like, which one's gonna be more disciplined? Which one's gonna, require? Which one's gonna build fruit? And that's what I want to be so intentional and disciplined with all of those choices in 2023, no matter what, with just, what fruit is that going to produce?
Yeah. Even for myself, when I first started in fitness, one of the things I did, not like knowingly, it wasn't like a principle I was consciously thinking of. It was just on my social media. I was on Instagram. And so, like, everybody on my timeline was going to the gym. I only follow people who were doing what
of course.
So, like, every time I would turn on my timeline, open up my timeline, I would see someone working out or going to the gym. And so it inspired me to go then. And so it's really important, like, who and what you have around you when you have a goal, like surrounding yourself or like immersing yourself in that community is so helpful. Like, we don't really think about the things we look at and listen to, but all those things are impacting us, right? Like, the human being is completely programmable, right?
Oh, absolutely. We see that all the time in law enforcement classes. Like, hey, SWAT officer, go use cover behind that column, or go show me how to use cover around your vehicle. And they run up and, like, hug cover and lean in over their patrol car. Where'd you learn that from? Oh, I don't know. Let's go. You saw it in an episode of Cops. Like, that's what happened. Yeah, it programmed you. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So just being able to realize that, like, okay, the way I'm programmed right now, is it working for me, or do I need to, like, update my software somewhere? Do I need to update my programming? Is so pivotal in a person's life. So, like you say, I'm the same way. There's some things that I'm used to not doing, like, at a certain point in my life, and I continue to do. And I had to look at recently and say, is this aligned with what I'm up to, or do I need to make some adaptations somewhere? So.
I think that's true. And I think that also goes back to just, you said earlier, what happens if you figured out you've been doing it wrong the whole time? Yeah. And we see that, guys who show up to class, and the first dude who looks at me in class in the intros and said, well, I'm, Bob, and I've been around guns all my life. That's the first dude that I stand beside when the first rounds go off. Yeah. Because he's the most likely to pull out a stainless steel 1911 and muzzle sweep the whole class. He just is, because there's that. Some bad habits. Yeah, right. Because it's bad habits, and it's like such a comfortability level, and so it is. And so it's just funny how there's triggers. And I caught myself doing the same. Well, like the ex, we were together almost 7 years, and it was, she never did anything to deserve the trust issues that I had. Everybody before her did, but it was, well, that's just what I've been doing, and that's what I'm used to. Yeah. And it's so easy for us to get in these habits, and then 10 years from now, or 10 years later, we realize that we've been shooting wrong the whole time, or we've been physical, and hopefully it's not 10 years, or a year later, we've been training wrong. We've been thinking wrong. We've been
speaking to ourselves wrong.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. In our head, I tell everybody, when you play out these mental images or mental videos in your head of, you in a fight or you self-defense, like, you always have to win. Like, that's just mindset. Yeah. And something I teach the guys in classes, it's, my mindset is, if we all fight right now, I am winning. Mm-hmm. I don't care if I'm the smallest dude or whatever, and I teach my women, if I go into like a doctor's office and teach active shooter, my first question is, guys, if I pull out a gun right now, who's winning? I'm like, oh yeah, you. I'm like, no. You should be the one that's winning, because no matter what, like, it's meant to, so maybe it's just us thinking wrong. or being in relationships wrong, or, just doing something that appeases us and produces no fruit. I think a hard reset is important. I know for me, I said it spiritually, mentally, of getting saved, having that new identity, that new transformation, just completely letting God take that over on the spiritual and mental side. I couldn't have done it. I mean, I couldn't have broken those habits, broken those addictions. Just a renewing in truth it is really what did it, and just learning truth. And then on the physical side, there's certain things that the way that I was taught to do, like one-handed mag changes, for instance. I taught that, I mean, that's how I was taught, for years, and that's how we taught it for years. And recently, about a year and a half ago, I sat there and I was like, why are we doing it this way? The answer was because that was the way that I was taught and the way that we were taught to instruct it, and the way that law enforcement agencies wanted it taught. But there comes a point where that's just no longer good enough. Like, it's challenge it. If you look at it tactically, it made no sense, and that's back when stick between your knees, and a lot of guys still train that way. Okay, you can't move, you can't fight, you're not balanced, the weapon's actually not secured. We have a holster. Like, you start there, And so no matter what, there's just things that we need to work on and change. I think being willing to change is one thing. I think being willing to identify and see truth, and not your truth or my truth, but the truth. The truth, right. And, as far as like the mental and spiritual, it honestly took a complete renewing of the mind. It just took a God transformation and just relationship. And it was, I told, it's like talking to God when I first got, I said, look, I can't do this. And I think that people go to Jesus or get saved in times of transitions and trials and tribulations. Like, I just do. I think it's either going to be something super challenging and just a trouble or tribulation, or a hard life transition. And I went through all of them. And, like I said, sitting there at a point of brokenness. And I think that that's what you have to humble yourself to, is just a point of brokenness and humility. And brokenness is not a bad thing. Right, absolutely. In order for him to remold you and reshape you, you got to be broken. Yeah. And I think we are, as a society, adversive to that, whether it's in physical, mental, or spiritual. I think that we are so adversive to pain or, heartache, and we're, on the spiritual side, just to being broken and realizing that we are at fault. We are such a narcissistic society. In the training side, it's just, hey, I don't have the answers and I don't know how to do this. Yeah. And then pushing yourself to achieve that, So I think that being broken, being at a point where you can honestly say, look, I don't have the answer, so now I need to find someone that does, and who can fix it. And I remember looking at God going, look, you're going to have to completely change my heart and mind. And in return, I'll change my behavior. Yeah. I will have to have the discipline and the intentionality to change my behavior. But you've got to change the heart and mind and give me the truth, to do it, and the strength. And I think that's honestly what it came down to. And I think we need to do that across the board. It's got to be, we have to, let's say in the physical and the training side, we have to renew our mindset. We have to renew our intentionality and discipline. And then, find someone who can deliver that training, who has truth, who has that knowledge. And, I think that's it. I think that's what we have to shift to in 2023 to see revival. And I think the revival, I'm going to ask, your definition of revival then?
Wow. Just revival for me is just, I just keep thinking about Ezekiel. So when you say revival for me, I think about the book of Ezekiel, and I just think about just a transforming or transferring from death back to life, or to life. So that's what I think about when you say revival. Like, it's at a place of brokenness. It's at a place of, where, you feel it's at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, like death is the end, right? In our minds, like death is the end, it's the end of the road. But God brings us to life from that place. And I think so revival is that place. But it takes for us to get there.
Right? Yeah,
like, a lot of us are like fighting to live. It's like, I'm just waiting for you to get to the end of the road. So I think that for me, revival is just bringing us miraculously to a place of life, true life, from a place of utter like decay and disgust.
Yeah. I think in the physical, it's going to be, and spiritual and mental, it's going to be a complete renewing to truth.
Yep.
That's what it's going to be. And in the mental and physical, it's going to be a complete renewing of our heart and mind and soul back to God's will and back to how we were actually designed, identity, and purpose. Yeah. I think in the physical, it's going to have to be completely letting go of all of our preconceived notions and just false ideas and false beliefs, and same in mental and spiritual. I mean, I had so many false beliefs and false ideas, and just completely renew heart, mind, soul, body, spirit, and truth. Yeah. I think that's what that revival is going to have to look like, whether that is back to training or, back into the Word. And, I would have said, I said earlier, I got saved July, and the sad part is I grew up in church. In June, I would have told you that I was a very strong conservative Christian. I went to church. I did everything I was supposed to do. I could quote scripture. Like, I was the one sharing all the memes on, Bible verses. I guess not memes, but, inspirational Bible verses. And, I would sit there and like talk about it in class, and I was very open with it. And I would have said, I was a strong conservative Christian. But then looked at the fruit of the life, and in most aspects, to friends, to students, to who, absolutely, I was there. Mm-hmm. But then I looked at the fruit that I was reaping, in relationships, in my personal mental and spiritual battles. And I was just toast. Like, I was, I lost every battle that there was. There was no victory there, and so I think that it was just a complete change. The day that I got saved, some people don't believe that God can talk to you, and I'm of the opinion that He can. Yes. So some people argue that He can't. It's not some loud Morgan Freeman voice, right, or the guy from the Allstate commercial. Okay, it's just. So I was sitting there, and I was just like dealing with the ex had just left, and just struggling with that, and I was saying, like, God, I just don't know what to do. And I think the last time I had turned to Him that hard was the last time the last ex left. It's trials and transitions, and so He spoke to me and said, "Do you know who George Washington is?" And I thought, what a random, what does that have to do with the price of eggs in China? And he's like, do you know who George Washington is? I'm a huge history buff. For the guys who don't know this, a huge history buff. And I said, of course I know who George Washington is. And he said, "Can you tell me about him?" "Yes, I can tell you all about him." I said, "Okay, well, can you tell me about his military campaign or personal detail?" "Yeah, I can tell you personal details. I can tell you what his wife's name was and where he grew up. And I got you on George Washington. Like, what does it have to do with anything?" And he said, "Have you ever met him?" Ooh, like, what a punch in the gut. And then he said, "I'll give you another example." He said, Civil War. "Okay. Can you tell me about this battle?" "Yeah, absolutely." "Okay, you can tell me who won, who lost, about how many died, tactics?" "Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you about it." "Well, did you fight in it?" And so I think that the difference is relationship and true knowledge and truth in relationship over just knowledge. It's one thing to be able to, tell me what the March algorithm is in tactical medicine, but have you done it? Like,
Yeah.
can you do it? You know, and I think with our spiritual, that has hit me the hardest is, you know, I would have said I was a Christian and, you know, all this kind of stuff. But did I have a true personal relationship grounded in truth? No, absolutely not. And I think we can apply that to so many aspects. And I think that we live in this world of half-hearted truth and half-hearted intentionality and half-hearted relationship. I think 2023 for me is going to be really digging into the truth, really digging into full relationship with him and with, you know, my guys and you guys and, you know, really being intentional and disciplined and just having that relationship, you know. And I thought about, you know, dating and that kind of thing. It's like, you know, honestly, being single right now is such a gift because it allows me to spend so much time in working on myself and relationship with him. And Paul made a relation to that. And I think that it's just going to be just renewing of hearts and minds and souls to the point that we really do just dive back into full truth and full relationship. And I think that's the way that we keep consistent change. You made a point earlier, people go to the gym. I'm one of those who would like, we would like lift and like I would be getting stronger, but it didn't look better. So it was like, check your motives. First of all, check your motives. Like I was not in the gym to look better. I was in the gym to perform better, and I was performing better, but because I didn't, again, it's half-hearted truth, you know? And you know, I was in a men's small group last week, and I immediately went home and wrote this down. And the guy leading the small group, he said, you know, some of you guys are newly saved Christians. You guys are just on fire for God and, you know, on fire. He said, I'm going to relate it to building a fire. And I was like, okay, I teach survival. I've built quite a few fires. I do this, okay. And he said, my guys who are just on fire for God right now, recently saved, recently transformed. And I was in fact, a couple students in that small group with me. And he's like, yo, you guys, he said, you guys are the light, fluffy stuff, the stuff that gets that fire started. You guys, you know, you guys are just lit up on fire. He said, but you burn fast. And he said, and if you don't start feeding it, you burn out fast and it doesn't build a fire. And he said, you know, so you're all in it. You've dove both feet. You're light and fluffy and you are just hot. That instantly just strikes that match and you're up there. He said, but think about it. Unless you start feeding it, you know, then you don't have a fire. You have some pine needles that just burnt to a crisp in 30 seconds. He said, so but without that, you can't just throw a piece of oak, light a match and set it on the piece of oak, you know. You have to have, like, you guys are so key in starting the fire. And he said, honestly, you know, if you want to spread that, if you take a bunch of fluffy stuff and you sweep it over into another fire, it can light another fire. You guys are so key in spreading and igniting and burning hot and bright for everybody to see. He said, the problem is you get the intermediate, you know, you get the tender. And this is their problem. It spoke to me so much because I teach your survival classes, and people's fire building skills are terrible because they skip. And when I teach it in class, you skip everything, your pinky finger size, everything that's pinky finger size, like in diameter. Yeah, not like in diameter. And he said that is really where the fire actually builds. And he said that's when you should be reading books, should be, you know, building those relationships, building the mentorship. You know, you should really be seeking truth and knowledge and just sitting there, just burning that flame, feeding that flame, getting bigger, to then be able to sustain the large pieces of oak, to be able to that hardwood that's going to sit there and keep that fire burning all night long. We try to go from fluffy to oak, and we skip the in-between. We skip the knowledge and the building of relationships and actual feeding and fueling of that fire and building it up gradually from less than pinky finger to pinky finger, then to, little branches, and then to bigger pieces. People do the same, and it just spoke to me because in survival classes, it's the same exact way. People's the fire burns out because they either bring me huge pieces of wood, and then they bring me like a pile of leaves, and there's nothing in between. And then the fire doesn't,
just explode.
Yeah, nothing works. Like the fire just burns out. Yeah. And I think that we can translate that to gym. Like I know it's my gym experience. I just do. Like either I was like, okay, I worked out really hard, and then I couldn't move my arms the next day because of lactic acid. Yeah. So then I could stretch my arms out like this, and it's about I couldn't reach anything. It was like so then I have to go teach a class where I have to actually shoot a pistol or a rifle. It's like just push through it. Can't do a ready up to save my life because I can't extend my arm, in less than 3 seconds. And so we do that, and then it's like, all right, this sucks. And then I skip the middle steps, and then it never actually lights that fire. Yeah. Or training. I've got guys, luckily, my group is so good. We have so many students that take 10 to 40 classes a year. They're just so good at keeping that fire burning. And those are the dudes that show up to classes who every other student's like, I want to be like that student. Mm-hmm. And it's the guy who started and didn't stop. And he keeps, and then, if you retake a class with us, it's half price, and they just sit there and retake the certain classes they need to work on. And it's so amazing to me. You got the guys that jump into like CQB. Like you don't even start with basics. You just, and you can start with CQB1. That's great. It's a great place to start. They'll start in with like team tactics because I think that was somewhere they need to start. Right. And then they realize that it's just an info dump, a knowledge dump, and they're like, I'm not prepared for this, and they don't come back, or they decide like, well, training really wasn't for me, and we just skip so many intermediate steps. Yeah. So I just rambled. So thoughts on that for a second.
That's so huge. It's so accurate. Like you said, it's somewhere like, okay, I want to get started, but it's the little things in between. Yeah. Like I always tell people, like inspiration comes, right? Like you can look at a photo and get inspired. You can look at an outfit. When it comes to fitness, you can look at something and get inspired. And that inspiration is that initial fuel for your fire. If you gotta look at it like that. Like inspiration is not enough to sustain a fire, right? Yeah. It's a starter fuel. You take that fuel and then it's discipline that establishes. It's those thicker branches, if you would. The discipline is the thicker branches. The inspiration is that energy, what you feel, right? But that discipline are the facts, right? Every day, if I go lift this heavy weight or heavier weight, my muscle is going to break down and then expand. That's a fact. It's a scientific fact. So if I do that over and over again, the results are going to come. But the inspiration is I want to fit into the outfit or I want to get down to, like that's that motivation. That's the energy that you use. And like I said, a lot of times, people think the inspiration is what builds it, and it's not. And so when you don't feel it, you don't do it, right? Because the inspiration is not what really creates the fire. The inspiration is just it's the initial, like I said, it's initial fuel, but it's not really what sustains the fire. It is the discipline. It's so true. And I look at my own life in so many different areas, man. I try to figure out what's wrong, there's the result's not there. And it's because, like I said, I looked over all the all the steps in between, all the process. So, it's accurate.
It's fun. So I've never thought about the intermediate branches being discipline. Mm-hmm. But it's fun, but that just clicked so hard. Yeah. So thank you for that. Yeah. I needed that. Oh, so good. So, and it's funny you say, what's your inspiration, what's your motivation? I know when 6 months ago when I first got saved and transformed, there was so many people, even in my family, they're like, oh, I won't last. Mm-hmm. And then it was also cautious, like, okay, well, don't change to try to get your ex back, and it was make sure your motivations are pure. And I was so frustrated at the time. I was like, what? Like, no, and it wasn't true, but I took so much offense to that, but they were just trying to, help me and check my motivation, because that's so true. Everybody's like, well, he might just be, putting on a show to get his ex back, or, and honestly, I understand where they're coming from, but in the moment you're like, no, right. I can't, like, you still believe in me. You don't, right. Yeah. And so it's checking. So then the motivation was, I just want to be healthy. I just want to be, renewed, and I want to stop living in this certain way, or making such destructive choices, or filling voids with, something that's just temporary happiness. And then translate that to fitness. If your goal is to look good, chances of you having that discipline, right. If your goal is to be healthy, if it's shooting, if your goal is to have a cool 1 second draw time on Instagram, which right. Some guys do, like they come to class, like my goal is just to shoot pistols better. I hear you. I'm not saying your goal is not right, but how about it's to just be an overall safer, better concealed carry holder? Like, what does that mean? That should also mean you should probably take a stop to bleed class. Yeah. That should mean you should also probably prep your truck, and should probably mean you should take like a legal class, and, just certain things. Just check your motive is so important, and just realize that motive is going to influence your identity in that. If I had changed to get the X back, if I had changed to, in my shooting, if I had taken tactical medicine just to say like, I got this, and to patch, myself up, and maybe not, or patch my buddies up, or, whatever, I might have missed or gotten a misplaced identity in that. And I think that a lot of times, motive we start a fire wrong. Mm-hmm. That inspiration, that motivation maybe isn't grounded in the right ways. And then that either leads to the fire never actually gets lit. You use just the completely wrong, you try to start it with the oak, and don't actually use fluffy stuff. It's wood. It's like, why is it burning? Exactly. Or we don't build a fire to even begin with, because the reason behind it, or the truth behind it, is just so misplaced. And so that identity, like we think that we're building a fire, but in reality, like we just built a bomb, and it's, the identity is just so not there. And I think that people are always searching for identity. And I think identity is one of those things that we need to be careful on. Because you do have the Kyles who are into CrossFit, who that becomes the identity, and that's why I say, like, they've built a bomb. It's not that they're actually becoming healthy. I'm not saying CrossFit's not healthy, but they take it to the point that they're on, or I've got students that go into it, and then within 1 month they're on, taking every health supplement under the sun. They can't keep any food down. They're, I have a family member who got on the same thing and was taking so many supplements they went into kidney failure. That is not, within like a month and a half. It was right. In the hospital with kidney failure because they were on so much creatine and protein and not actually balancing out anything, and then not drinking anything. And it built up just to a level of toxicity in their system. And so we have to be careful identity. And I think that 2023 to me needs to get us back, and same thing with shooting, it's identity, needs to get us back to truth and identity, and what we're finding our identity in. I don't find my identity in being a firearms instructor. I just don't, and I have in the past, and I can. Just like you, I'm sure you don't get your identity being a, wellness coach or, a gym dude or anything else. So I think that we need to look at areas that we are finding our identity in, and then looking at what fruit that's producing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the relationship aspect. A lot of times, I took a break from relationships after one major one in my life that went south. Yeah, and I realized that my identity was always connected to a relationship.
Oh, mine too, for sure. Yeah,
and it is for the good or for the bad, right? Right. Like, your identity is impacted by your relationships to things or to people. And so, like you said, whether it's the gym, whether it's a person, whether it's like, I've created this whole identity based on my relationship with. So, like, what's my relationship with truth, or what's my relationship with God? Like, and then forming a healthy, productive identity around that versus everything else, like, because some people go to the gym just to bench press. Oh, sure. And their identity is connected to the bench press. Right. And so, like, that is one of the things, definitely, just looking at my identity, what I've established, what I've conditioned myself to accept as identity, and basing it on those relationships that I have, maybe, ending some or whatever.
It's funny you say that because I've been going through the same thing. Like, who do I want to like date or in the future? Like, what was I attracted to in the past, and and what does that look like moving forward? And I would inevitably choose the women who found their identity in the relationship. Because they would do anything for a relationship, or they would match my energy, who also found, identity in the relationship. But then, now looking back at it, I honestly, the most attractive thing to me would be to find someone who doesn't need to date anybody. Yeah. That would just be the most, you are whole as a person, and I am whole as a person. And now if we happen to just benefit each other and find it more enjoyable, that's awesome.
Yeah, we can share maybe.
Yeah. There's no expectations. There's no, Dan Muller is my favorite. Need and love are exact opposites. Yeah. And that hit me so hard. He said, because when you find your identity in a relationship or in the gym you need it. But if you need it, that's a selfish, right? And the opposite of love, people say is hate. It's not, or it's self-centeredness. Because if you look at true love is completely selfless. Wow. And so if you need something to fill your own self, just like I did, whether it's to feel validated or affirmation or whole or whatever, there's such a high expectation, and that's something I'm still working through. Such a high expectation on that, and it comes to a point where, in a relationship specifically, you honestly cannot love that person. You can't, and if we're supposed to find love through God, I've never seen where God's selfish, ever. In fact, his whole embodiment is completely selfless. Jesus, completely selfless. And so I've got guys who need that spouse. Or I know growing up, it was parents. Was kids. You needed your kid to do this, or you needed your kid to be in sports, or you needed your kid, and it was completely self-centered and self-driven, and was not out of love. And so I would love to find somebody that's completely whole, that does not need a relationship. That would be the most attractive thing to me right now. Is to find somebody that does not need a relationship, that is completely whole in themselves, needs nothing. I don't need anything. Get to a point where I need nothing. I don't need them. And then you can start to love without expectation and without any motives, or without them needing to fill that void. So my challenge to you guys who are out there looking to date somebody is find somebody that is not looking to need you. That's the best thing. And then before you date anybody, get to a point where you don't need them. Because then it just, that was my problem, is then you sit there, well, what can I make them do for me to show that they love me? Or what can they show me? How can they fill this void? All right, well, then I need to do this, or they need to do that. And there's such expectations, and none of that is grounded in love. None of that is grounded. It's the opposite of love. So that's my challenge to you guys. Completely off topic.
No, it's on topic, man. Bringing us to a place of wholeness for real. We're talking about these different aspects of health and development, physical, spiritual, mental, man. And I think that brings you to a place of wholeness. It
is, yeah. So I wrote, funny was it, my journal entry from this past week was: the gospel is a return and restoration to life and purpose, and a return to God in all things, being made new in his wholeness, back to the original purpose and identity. Just to surrender it, let it go, let him overtake it, and change it back to his image, a true reproduction after his own seed. And I think that's been a big thing for me. It's just going back to wholeness, going back to just letting things go, releasing things, putting on that new identity, changing your mind in truth. I grew up very Baptist, where it was such a, you get saved, so if you die in a car wreck on the way home from church, you're going to heaven. It was just, the term everlasting life was just thrown, that's the reason for salvation. And I think that has been a modern day complete deception. And I think it's all about transformation now. I don't think the goal is heaven. I think the goal is the heaven is a perk. My opinion. I think that the benefit now is we're called to live a new life now, being a transformed life now, being made whole now, to shine our light now. It was one of those where I put it off before. I always say it was, well, I'll get my life right before I die. Like, there was just such, a messed up way to think. But it was like, I'll change, once I'm married with kids, and so I think that the life that was meant doesn't start with heaven. It's not the goal. I think that the transformation process, I could have already been married with kids had I have gone back to live the way I was supposed to, and changed and transformed the way I was supposed to, and just staying under his headship and just submitting and changing and transforming. So any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, even in looking at it like that, I think he brings us on our journey to bring us to a place of wholeness and, relationship. And, what that may look like to us, maybe why didn't you make it look like this? Or maybe I could have done it, this way before, but, all things work together for the good. Yeah. And I think that, the ultimate goal is, like I said, wholeness. Because one day it says we'll be able to judge angels, right? The Bible script speaks about that. And I think that that level of authority is connected to just a spiritual development here. It's an achievement. It's like, okay, because you've achieved this place of relationship with me and integrity, if you would, in some way, or understanding of relationship with me, that's why you'll be able to do these things. And I think so, to speak to your point about it being down here, I think that could be a part of it, the development and relationship and revelation, if you would, that we get in our walk of wholeness here allows us to be rewarded that authority there. So I just want to speak. I guess I'm speaking to the point where you said, maybe I would have been married before with kids and things like that. But you know what? Maybe the point is to bring you to wholeness, and whatever that journey looked like here is what it took or what it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No doubt. I mean, so much of that is spot on. Yeah, it is just such a journey and just a renewing and putting off the old, putting on the new. That's the whole point, I think, of just water baptism and salvation is if you go back to it, it's a complete transformation, a complete new person, a new way of thinking, a new mindset, new habits, new everything of him just completely. It's a new person. Yeah, that's what it's a complete transformation and a new person. It's not just a ritual that we do, because that's what the church has always done. Mm-hmm. It's something that should symbolize something else, a complete transformation, a new person. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Two things I always want to leave the audience is a training challenge and a spiritual challenge. So in the training aspect, since this has been such a good discussion, it's going to be what is going to be the training challenge that you're going to give for physical, being well-rounded, discipline, all of that, intentionality. And then what's the spiritual challenge?
Well, I'd say connect the days. So let's go with 3 days a week of some type of fitness activity. Okay. Some type of sweat, some type of, you can find steps, you can walk, you can dance, you can do, but find the consistency of those 3 days a week. Just, don't overwhelm yourself. Don't say, I'm going to go 7 days, 2 times a day. So just right. Say, I know how that is. Just say 3 days a week. It's lifestyle for me. I'm going to go do some type of activity, exercise. Okay. So, yeah.
My challenge, you have to do both of ours, is going to be more intentional coming up and start prepping, start planning for 2023. And Christmas is coming, all that's coming. My thing is going to be think about, instead of just giving the generic Christmas list or whatever, do a class, get a gift card or do a class or come up with some type of gear or something that you need to increase your discipline or to increase your level of preparedness, something intentional instead of just something off the wall. Okay, what's your spiritual challenge?
Spiritual challenge, again, connected to discipline. My practice right now is reading a proverb a day.
Okay.
It's 31 of them. kind of equals the days in a month, most months. So just a proverb a day. They're not long, but that book of wisdom, I think, is really helpful. So I kind of take it one of those a day.
That's definitely something I'm going to do then. My spiritual challenge for you is going to be evaluate your fruit. Think of where your fruit maybe is rotten and start looking at how can we fix it. And that could also be true in your physical, right? The intentionality. Think about where your gear preps are rotten, where your training, routine or your training has weaknesses or rotten fruit, and then be intentional and set the discipline on how to fix it. Also, we're coming back from, Thanksgiving. So I think what's helped me more than anything is just being thankful and going back to that thanks. And that's part of that identity, I think. There's been so many times where, dude, like in the past with X or something, I would like have a bad dream. As stupid as that sounds, you guys can judge me. That's okay. Have a bad dream. And it's like, where she cheats on you or something, if you've got whatever type of issues you have, or it's just struggling with identity, or you wake up and you're just not feeling right, or, you're just down, and instead of turning to some type of destructive behavior, it's, to me, the way that I have overcome that is just thanks. Like, man, thank you that I am different. Thank you that doesn't affect me anymore. Thank you with that relationship. It's, that it's in the past and you're in control of that, and it's not on me anymore. And, just surrendering a lot more and just being thankful for that. So that's going to be my other challenge is just come back from Thanksgiving, start looking at being thankful, and identify with that. Let that be your new identity. Be thankful for your new identity. Believe it. Have some faith, in it, and just being thankful. I think that's one way that we can, as Justin said earlier, like how do we fix it? We've been living wrong or doing something wrong for a while. Be thankful for truth, and start to identify with that. Be thankful that you're not that person anymore. Be thankful that you don't have that habit anymore, and then identify with it. I think that's one way that faith, like grace, empowers faith. So you believe it, you have faith in it, and grace makes it happen. Anything else you want to add to thankfulness?
No, it's just how powerful it is, really. That's living in that space of thankfulness. Now, I don't really have anything I want to add. I just want to, agree with you in how powerful it is. So.
Well, I'm thankful that you joined us on this podcast. So thanks, guys, for tuning in to episode 2, and join us back for episode 3.